Well, we're here to talk this morning about the CARS Rule. And I have been studying this since it was proposed. And it is awful. As bad as you think it might be, I'm here to tell you this morning that it is probably worse. Take a look at its title, a tortured acronym, Combating Auto Retail Scams, the CARS Rule. It indicates that we are all in an evil industry. We are in the business of scamming people. And we know that that is not true. We're in the business of helping people with the second biggest transaction and the largest repeated transaction that most people have in their adult lives. We don't scam people. We serve people. And the fact that what was originally published as the Motor Vehicle Retailer Sales Regulation Rule, that's what it went out as, and then it gets published as Combating Auto Retail Scams, tells you everything you need to know about what, don't want to get political, but our current administration thinks about our industry. Okay, disclaimer. I am a lawyer. I'm not your lawyer. Move on. My old friend.
The government's view of the economy could be summed up in a few short phrases. If it moves, tax it. If it keeps moving, regulate it. And if it stops moving, subsidize it.
Yes. Well, this is an example of number two. If it keeps moving, regulate it. And in this case, overregulate it. So what is the CARS Rule? Well, it's a trade regulation rule that is issued under the authority of the Federal Trade Commission Act. That is technically what the thing is. So think of Regulation Z issued under TILA, the Truth in Lending Act. TILA is the authorizing legislation. Regulation Z is the implementing regulation. It gives you the details. So laws tend to be short, regulations tend to be very long and very detailed. That's the nature of the CARS Rule. Here's what it does. These are the published rationales for the CARS Rule. This is what the Federal Trade Commission says they are attempting to do. This is their intention. One, it prohibits misrepresentations about material information. In other words, lying. In other words, fraud. Take a step back. Are you trying to tell me that fraud is currently legal? And the Federal Trade Commission just discovered it. Great Scott! There are people lying in car dealerships. We must make this illegal. Really? Number two, it requires dealers to clearly disclose the offering price, the actual price anyone can pay to get the car, excluding only required government charges, such as taxes, battery fees. Guess what? That's currently the law right now. It happens to be honored in the breach almost universally. In other words, dock fees, where legal, currently, today, need to be included in the advertised price. No one does that, virtually no one. And why do dealers not advertise the full price? Two reasons. One is all of my competitors are not including that in the advertised price. And if I put my dock fee in the advertised price, I won't get any customers. Fair. Until everyone complies, those who comply are at a competitive disadvantage. And that is not fair. But the other reason is this, and it actually, I think, serves the customer. How many people really shop top line price or bottom line price? Most people do not have $52,000 in their checking account right now. They can't stroke a check. They can't be a cash customer. So what they care about is, what is the monthly price? Generally, prices are quoted when you get down to negotiation as monthly price, because that's what people care about. They're not paying cash. They want to know, can I afford it in my monthly budget? This whole rule is going to take the conversation away from how customers want it to go. It goes this way because that's what customers want and expect. If all they wanted to know was on the rim and out the door price, we'd be quoting that. Number 3, makes it illegal for dealers to charge consumers for add-ons that don't provide a benefit. 2 things. 1, they don't call it an F&I product. They don't call it a voluntary protection product. They call it an add-on. Now, doesn't an add-on sound like it has no value? It tells me you're being nickeled and dimed to death. The Federal Trade Commission worked hard on this vocabulary. They worked hard to make the industry we serve look bad. The products that you sell, they're trying to reduce to a triviality, an add-on, like a convenience fee at Ticketmaster. Yeah, that's not fair and it's not right. But guess what? Charging people for something that doesn't do something is still illegal. It's still fraud. They only had 2 examples they could come up with. 1, selling nitrogen, nitrophyll, without putting it in the tires. That's always been illegal. That's like selling a car and not giving it to you. And that's the best example they could come up with. By the way, in defense of nitrophyll, when I was in private practice in DC representing government contractors, one of my clients was a company that created nitrogen machines, sucks in the ambient atmosphere, and separates it out into oxygen and nitrogen. Did you know the United States Navy will not deploy an aircraft carrier without not 1 but 2 functioning nitrogen generators on board? 2, because if one breaks, you still need the other one. Why? They won't let their aircraft fly without nitrogen in their tires. That's true, because the tires last longer and they hold their pressure longer. The Navy will not let you fly without nitrogen in your tires. There's value there. Now, is there $4,000 worth of value? Probably not. But appropriately priced, nitrophyll is a perfectly legitimate product, and it shouldn't be picked on by people who've never sold a car. The other example they had was Gap on a cash deal. If you can do that, you're strong. But their example was selling Gap where you can't sell it, cash deal, or if you have, a 90% down payment. Those are the only examples they could even come up with theoretically. Your products are not illegal, and I don't call them add-ons. They have value, and people should be able to choose to buy them without the government telling them it's a really, really bad idea. And it gets worse. Number 4, requires dealers to get consumers express informed consent before charging them for anything. I will get into the minutia of this shortly. But let me tell you, if there's one thing that has to go from the CARS Rule, it is this. Their definition of express informed consent and how you confirm it is going to make the transaction take longer, be more miserable, make it vastly more difficult to sell any voluntary protection products. It's going to crater customer satisfaction, CSI, it's going to drop through the floor, and it's going to cost customers more money. Other than that, it is a great deal. Let's go into a little bit of detail. Why do you need a rule when all this stuff is already illegaler? Trying to make it more illegaler? Well, there's this case, AMG Capital Management versus the Federal Trade Commission. This is about 3 years ago. And in that case, AMG Capital Management, which was a payday loan company, they were accused of doing ugly things. I don't know if they did them or not. Doesn't matter. What matters is they were fined $1.27 billion. Fined $1.27 billion. I track FTC enforcement actions, particularly in the automotive space. This is the biggest fine ever. And this one was levied during the Trump administration. Three Republican commissioners, 2 Democrats at the time. So most fines are $1 million, $10 million. But you know what? If you only got fined $10 million, and I'm your lawyer, and you want to take this to the Supreme Court, we got to get through the appellate courts, then we got to go to the Supreme Court. If you get cert, it's going to cost you $10 million. Most people just pay the fine. Or really, really big fines like LifeLock got about a decade ago. They were fined approximately $100 million, but $90 million was stayed. As long as you stay good, you won't have to pay that $90 million. Guess what? They weren't good, and they did have to pay it. The point of this is this. Most people don't take these fines all the way to the Supreme Court. It does not make economic sense. But when you fine someone $1.27 billion, you can't afford not to litigate it all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States, and AMG Capital Management did. And guess what? The Supremes, in a 9-0 unanimous decision, ruled in favor of AMG. They said the Federal Trade Commission has no statutory authority to assess fines. I've been saying this for 25 years. I'm glad the Supremes have finally caught up. And by the way, this is an incredibly shocking result, devastating to the Federal Trade Commission. 5-4, you could say it's politics. 9-0, they can't agree on what to order on their pizza 9-0. So this is an incredible slam on the Federal Trade Commission assessing fines under a rule that wasn't authorized by the Act. So the FTC is no longer able to find violators right out of the box. What they've always had the right to do is get injunctive relief. Thou shalt not. AMG Capital Management, thou shalt not charge minorities more for payday loans. And if you violate that consent order, that injunction, then you may fine them. But the Federal Trade Commission has never had the right to fine companies right out of the box because they always relied on Section 5 of the Federal Trade Commission Act saying you can enforce unfair and deceptive acts, enjoin unfair and deceptive acts, but it didn't say what those acts were. That's why the authorizing legislation needed specific implementing regulation. What is a deceptive trade practice? So all of those things that we have assumed to be illegal forever, well, they were, but they weren't specified in a trade regulation rule, and therefore you couldn't get fined for them. The Department of Justice could go after you. State attorney generals could go after you. Plaintiffs' lawyers could go after you in some circumstances. But the FTC couldn't, and they wanted to play. They didn't want everybody else to have all the fun. So FTC now needed a trade regulation rule, and the CARS rule is that trade regulation rule. That's why we're here. And oh, by the way, if all the CARS rule did was that, I'm okay. Everybody else can find bad actors. Now the Federal Trade Commission gets to do so. Not a hill I am going to die on. But of course, that is not where they stopped. So what does this all mean for dealers? And really, one is it's always been against the law, according to the Federal Trade Commission, to advertise anything other than that full price, what they're now calling the offering price. That has always been illegal. The problem is AMG Capital Management case proved it was unenforceable, or is unenforceable with monetary fines. So the NADA publishes their Driven Guide series, and this stuff is really good. You can go on the NADA website and download this. Agents in particular, I recommend that you do so, because if the CARS rule survives litigation anywhere close to its current form, you're going to need to know this, and dealers are going to need to know this. What can you say, what can't you say in the course of an ad? For example, this is just one example from that guide, and there are all kinds of things wrong with this particular advertisement. Everybody financed. Not really, we know better. $32,000, well, yeah, but that's after a certain amount of trade equity or cash down payment. What this whole guide is talking about is whatever price you advertise better be the all-in price, no qualifications, no fine print, no rebates pulled out of the advertised price, no stacked rebates. The only rebates you will be allowed to factor into the offering price are those that are available to absolutely everyone. So you can't give both a active duty military rebate and a conscientious objector rebate. Doesn't work. But if you have a rebate for everybody in the month of June, you can deduct that from the offered price. And you know what? If everybody's prices go up, do I care? Not really. But if you're the only dealer who plays fair, you're going to be at a competitive disadvantage. Dealers need to know what they need to do. This guide, although it's several years old and was not written in connection with the CARS rule, is still valid, and I really do recommend downloading it and sharing it with your dealers. Advertising includes your website. In fact, this is possibly a dealer's most potent advertising medium. And it's the one that's going to get you in the most trouble. Because you could avoid the offering price trap by not advertising price at all until you feature a specific vehicle. And if you have an image of a specific vehicle, you must publish the offering price in close proximity to it. So, do you think your dealers have a website that has 200 cars on it? Sure, that's not unusual. Could be a lot bigger. If there are problems with the website, it's not going to be on one car. It's going to be on all of them. So what is the current fine? The fine that the Federal Trade Commission will be allowed to assess when the CARS rule goes live is it adjusts up for inflation every year. And I believe it's currently $51,744. I could be off by a bit. But it's more than 50 grand per violation. So let's just say it's 50 grand. 50 grand times 200 cars is how much? I'd give you a hint. It's got a couple of commas. And they're not going to assess a fine for one advertised vehicle. If they're going to hit you, they're going to hit you for all of them. And I'm not trying to pick on AutoNation, who's here. I just happened to download this in January from their website, just as an example. And I noticed, oops, you see that 2023 Ford Explorer? It's advertised as new, and it has 2,527 miles on it. This has nothing to do with the CARS rule, but the Federal Trade Commission defines a used car as any vehicle that has more miles on it than reasonably necessary for delivery and test drives. 200 miles might be the upper limit. In other words, advertising a car, a vehicle with 2,500 miles on it as new is a violation in the eyes of the Federal Trade Commission. I think a used car is one that's been titled in somebody else's name, that's been sold before. Federal Trade Commission disagrees. So this is going to be a big issue for all of your dealers. They have to get their websites right. There are other things involved, such that you're not allowed to have fine print. You have to have all the disclosures in that space. There's no room. You cannot click through to get more information. You are not allowed to require, give us your name, give us your cell phone number, give us your email, and then we will give you the price. No room for that. Your dealers, when the CARS rule becomes enforceable, your dealers can spend a lot of money internally making sure that everything's okay, or spending money on a vendor like me to make sure that everything's okay. And by the way, I don't want your money, not for this. Our approach to this is we want to work with the companies that make the websites, coach them on how to make their websites compliant so the dealers don't have to worry about it. Because if you give this to the dealers, Katie, bar the door. They need to sell cars. They don't need to do legal interpretation of regulatory overreach. So this one, you need to be able to convince your dealers to have their vendor who helps them with their website certify that they are complying with the CARS rule. Dealer fees. I believe these are a dead deal. The point of a dealer fee is it preserves front-end gross so that your salespeople can't give it away. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. But it is a fee at the bottom that, as long as it's not outrageous, I see it as a legitimate fee. For example, complying with the CARS rule costs money, a lot of money. And that's got to be recovered somehow. Complying with all of the regulations that dealers are required to comply with costs money. Recovering that money is not illegal, immoral, or fattening. However, if you're not allowed to put it on your buyer's order or put it on your installment sale contract, it has to be in the offered price. It has to be. And if you put it in your buyer's order installment sale contract, then you're going to have to subtract it out, net it out, to make it make sense with the offered price. Well, that's silly. So dealer fees are gone. Call them dealer fee, doc fee, pre-sale prep, I don't care. Unless it's in the advertised price, you can't have it in the transaction. And if it's in the advertised price, you're not going to repeat it on the deal paperwork. Dealer fees are absolutely going to die if the CARS rule survives litigation in its current form. Addendum stickers. Sorry, Pulse guy, but addendum stickers are almost certainly going to die unless the total amount that's at the bottom of the addendum sticker is already in the sticker. So addendum stickers as a sales tactic, it's going to be very, very, very difficult to navigate this. In other words, if you're selling Pulse, a good product, it does reduces rear-end collisions, good product. But if the dealer's going to use that to up their front-end gross, it's going to have to be in the advertised price. And you could still have an addendum sticker describing what we have in the vehicle. That's fine. It's using addendum stickers to increase the price above the advertised price that is the problem. So addendum stickers today can be done in an effective and legally compliant manner. I've also seen them done in a wildly illegal manner. I recently saw an example of an addendum sticker that added a cost for engraving the VIN on a catalytic converter in California, you're with me so far, on a Tesla. That's the same guy who does Gap on a cash deal. For those of you who don't know, electric vehicles do not have catalytic converters. So yes, I've seen felonies on addendum stickers, but I think they're going to go the way of the dinosaur if the CARS rule sees the light of day. And other things, market value adjustment, those days are gone for a while. We know that. But that is prima facie illegal, right out of the box. You can't, that is just another $29.95 on top of the advertised price. Under the CARS rule, it's indefensible. It just can't happen. If it's not in the offered price, you can't try to recover it anywhere else in the transaction. Can you read that? Didn't think so. It says no fine print. Because one of the requirements of the CARS rule is clear and conspicuous disclosures. You can't get to fine print from their definition of clear and conspicuous disclosure. And the clear and conspicuous disclosures have to be done in close proximity to the advertised price or whatever it is you're modifying. And the practical problem with that is you can't fit it all in an ad. And the OEMs have requirements of how much of a particular image has to be the vehicle. I've been told by people who are in the advertising business that it will literally be impossible to legally advertise. Again, the people who make the rule don't sell cars. This is part of the disaster. And you can't have a button that will click you to something that's not fine print, but 14-point Arial bold. If it's not on the page, if it's not within the image, the government says it's not clear or conspicuous. Even if it's convenient, even if you're directed to it, their definition includes the following phrase: must be impossible to miss. And you can't fit all of the mandatory disclosures in a single image. I just don't know how you're going to do this. This is why it's being litigated. Oh, one last thing. I just need to confirm your express informed consent. Oh, Lordy, this is the one that's going to tank CSI, make the process longer, and make it really, really difficult for you to sell product. Here's why. This is the definition. Express informed consent means an affirmative act communicating unambiguous assent to be charged, made after receiving and in close proximity to a clear and conspicuous disclosure in writing, and also orally for in-person transactions of the following: what the charge is for, and the amount of the charge, including, if the charge is for a product or service, all fees and costs to be charged to the consumer over the period of repayment, with and without the product or service. The following are examples of what does not constitute express informed consent. 1, a signed or initialed document by itself. Stop! What? When I went to law school, it was a long time ago. Moses was my classmate. When I went to law school, I was taught that if you signed a contract, one signature, you create a rebuttable presumption that I've read the document, I understand the document, and I agree to be bound by its terms. And that is still the law. That is contract jurisprudence from sea to shining sea in every other transaction but buying a car or light truck. You can buy a house with one signature, but you cannot buy a car. Am I the only one who's a little ticked right now? This is baloney, but it's the law. Okay, backward reels the mind. A single signature isn't enough. I know what I'll do. I've got this great idea. I will create a brand new document, and I will have a TILA box, not just for the whole transaction, which we currently have, but for every single F&I product that does exactly what I'm told. I have to tell you, what does it cost? Service contract, $3,000. Then I have to say 9% for 7 years. The total charge is going to be $4,200 for every single F&I product. The government is whispering in the ear of every customer, don't you buy this. This is too expensive. And you have to go through this every single item. It is absolutely crazy. But I'm going to create this document that does that. I'm going to have a TILA box for every single product. And then I'm going to have you sign it. Yeah, but that's just a signature. If the signature wasn't good on the buyer's order, why is the signature going to be good on this supplemental document? Oh, I'll make another document that certifies that I like that last document. The government tells us what express informed consent is not. It's not a signature, but they will not tell us, and I've asked right here in Las Vegas, they will not tell us what it is. We're guessing. Blood? Hair sample? Little DNA? Pledge my firstborn male child? I don't know. We don't know. We're not going to know until somebody gets sued and fined for doing it wrong. This is the part that has to go. This is the part that has us litigating against the Federal Trade Commission. There's more to it, but this is the worst of the worst. Offering price, the second worst of the worst. If you got rid of these two things, I probably would say, yeah, new regulation, move on. But this is what's going to make our business suffer, and it's going to be bad for consumers. Oh, an agreement. This is also illegal. An agreement, number 3, obtained through any practice designed or manipulated with the substantial effect of subverting or impairing user autonomy, decision-making, or choice. In other words, you can't bully people. You can't lock them in the F&I box. Think that's never happened? It's happened in Florida. Not too far from Tampa, it was a Bill Hurd story, so I can use its name. Woman came in, wanted to try a car out, test drive it. They threw her keys on the roof. They locked her in the F&I office. They would not let her go. They would not let her eat. They would not let her pee. Sometime around midnight, she signed all the documents, drove home in a new car. In the morning, she called the cops. And they came and they arrested the F&I director for kidnapping. Actually, technically, false imprisonment. Cost them more than $1 million just to make this go away. I was sharing this story in a training session not long after it happened. One of the guys in the audience came up to me when I was done speaking. He said, I was there. I was one of the salespeople that day that happened. What you failed to mention is it wasn't just the $1 million and the $1.2 million that Bill Hurd had to stroke to make this thing go away. Nobody came to our store for a month. Every single salesperson lost his job. I was one of those salespeople. I lost my job because no one would come to Bill Hurd. Eventually they started coming back, but everybody else was at another store. So that's always been illegal. It's illegal here. Other things to talk about, we'll get to it in due time, but this whole thing of how do you, if a signature won't confirm assent in written documentation, how the heck do you document oral agreements? We're going to get there shortly. So can we dodge this bullet? We're trying. Short answer, maybe. Short answer, maybe some of it. I think the CARS rule is going to land in some form probably in the next year. It's gonna. We don't know how bad it is going to be. It could wind up being every bit as bad as what I've just described, or we may be able to beat it back a little bit. I hope we can. But it's coming. Don't think that it's not. How do we dodge the bullet? Because the bullet is inbound. Well, there is a bill that's been introduced, both in the House and in the Senate, that would squash the CARS rule. It has zero chance of passage. Zip, zilch, none. Why? We don't have a veto-proof majority of intelligent people in Congress. And, the guy who was behind this rule is still in the White House, and he's going to veto this bill if it ever gets to him, which it will not. So, not happening. It's a nice effort. I appreciate it. NADA is supporting this bill, as they should. That's their job. But it doesn't have a snowball's chance. More likely is NADA's litigation. NADA with TADA, can we say forum shopping? NADA and TADA sued the Federal Trade Commission to overturn the CARS rule. Yay, NADA. Why would they do it with the Texas Automobile Dealers Association? Why just that one? It might be because of where NADA resides, inside the Beltway. DC Circuit, no bueno. But Texas Automobile Dealers Association is located in, of all places, Texas. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, much more rational, much better venue to hear this litigation, and that's why NADA teamed up with TADA. That is my interpretation, by the way. They've never said that. They've never told me. So, January 4th, 2024, when was the CARS rule published? If I'm not mistaken, it was January 3rd. So the very next day, NADA filed this litigation to put a stake through its heart. In other words, they'd been working on this for a year, and they were just waiting for the shoe to drop. Next day, they filed what was an excellent petition for review. I have read it. Then they filed an opposed motion for stay of final rule and for expedited consideration. And what this means is, yes, we're litigating to make this thing go away, to overturn the CARS rule, but in the meantime, it's still the law, and it's going to be enforced on July 30th. So we need to stay enforcement, erase that July 30th enforcement date until we get through this litigation, and let's have expedited consideration. Let's speed things up. Dealers need to know what they need to know. Opposed motion. NADA is required by rule to contact the opposing party, the Federal Trade Commission, say, hey, we want to stay. Are you willing to make it an unopposed motion, and then the court automatically grants the stay, or are you going to oppose it? They say, we're going to oppose it. We're going to fight you tooth and nail. We will fight you on the beaches. We will fight you on the headlands. So it's going to be a battle. NADA, TADA, they're ramping up their briefing. And on the 18th of January, I was in D.C. the day it happened. And I'm literally talking to Mike Stanton, the president of NADA. He said, Jim, did you hear? We're not good buddies. We're just being introduced. He said, Jim, did you hear we got the stay? And I said, what? The FTC hasn't even filed their brief yet in opposition. He said, well, Paul Mitre's here. He'll explain the details. I tracked down Paul Mitre, NADA attorney. He said, the FTC changed their mind. They are going to, and they did, they issued an order staying enforcement. I said, why the heck would they do that? They've been opposing this for 2 weeks. He said, Paul said, today is the day that they had to file their brief in opposition. And I think they know they're going to lose. And that's going to be bad. They're going to lose the temporary injunction. So that would be a terrible result for the FTC. So they took the, moral high ground. And in the interests of justice, they voluntarily stayed enforcement, which, by the way, they could have done 2 weeks earlier, but did not. So right now, if this were tennis, I'd say advantage NADA. When all this happened, when NADA had filed their petition, I reached out to Paul Mitre, sent him a fairly detailed email. I said, Paul, I've read your work. I've read the brief. Obviously, I've read the rule. And I think this is awful. And what I really object to is the Federal Trade Commission saying this is not going to have any cost impact on dealers. That's nuts. I run a compliance company. This is what we do for a living. And we spent the last several weeks working overtime, literally trying to craft a response to help dealers comply with this rule. And I'll tell you, our best estimate is full compliance is probably going to cost each location, every rooftop, somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,500 per month. And that's just to tick all the boxes and do it in a fairly efficient manner. And I said, if you need an affidavit in support of your litigation, I'm happy to do it. He said, thanks, I'll take that under advisement. A couple weeks later, I get a call from his boss, Andy Koblins, and he says, Jim, remember when you offered to help? Yeah. Would you please organize an amicus brief? Because we have about 100 pages of argument we need to make, but there's approximately a 35-page limit on our brief. So we would love it if Mosaic would do an amicus brief, amicus meaning friend of the court, amicus curiae brief, in support of our lawsuit focusing on the costs of compliance. And we would like you to get all of your competitors to sign up. I said, I will do that. And I also said, and if we get no help, we have to pay for it. I said, I'll pay for that personally. This is against our interest. It's against all of my competitors' interest. We predicted a $4 million bump in EBITDA in the first year. That's how big a deal this is. But we're fighting it because it's the right thing to do. We need to defend the industry we serve. That's where we make our money. And although we would make more with the CARS rule, don't forget what got you here. So we contacted a lot of people. A lot of people said yes. At the end of the day, these are the companies that are willing to spend money and be publicly identified as opposing the Federal Trade Commission. And there is fear in the industry. I will support NADA through my trade association, through GAPA, VAPA, SCIC. But I don't want my name out there because I don't want the FTC hating on me. Not irrational. Mosaic Compliance Services, that's us. APCO Holdings, that is Tony Wandren. Ascent Dealer Services, that would be, I forget his name, Adam Marburger. Auto Advisory Services Corp., Max Zanin. Automotive Compliance Education, that is Gil Vanover. Brightline Dealer Advisors, Eric Dragoo. American Warranty Group, Kristen Gruber. Portfolio, Jeremy Lux. These people took a risk and put their money where their mouth was to support the industry that they serve. And I'm not asking for a round of applause, but I don't want it to be forgotten. So, what did we say in this 27-page brief? We explained just how expensive it is to comply. What are the costs of compliance? By category, not by amount. You need a CARS Rule policy. This is the foundation of pretty much all legal compliance in the dealership. What's your written policy? Prove to me that it's against your policy to do this bad act. And it doesn't take much to do this, but it does take some effort. And don't just live with a template. It needs to be customized, and yes, your lawyer should look it over. Then you have to have training, and I would say recurring training on both the rule and your policy and how you follow the rule, particularly at your dealership. The air is dry and the nights are long. Retention of training records. You've got to train your people. That's mandatory. You also have to retain these records for at least 2 years of what did you train them, and I'm extrapolating, did they get it? So you want to have electronic records that show what did you teach, and you have to have a test at the end. That's really what this is driving at. And I need to know who took that test and what their score was. If you want our solution, it's going to be 100%. That's the only thing I can say that's going to keep you safe. 80% compliant probably ain't going to cut it. So get trained, take the test, pass with 100%, and then retain the records. Review the ads, and you got to keep the records of the ads you reviewed. And this is, you need eyeballs and fingers to do this. I do not see a convenient technology solution for this yet, but again, if we can get the people who are making the websites, program it in, that's going to take a lot of the problem away. Website reviews. I want to make sure that website is squeaky clean, but honestly, I don't want to look at every car every day on a dynamic website. I don't think dealers are going to be expected to do that either. We need to get a certification out there. Yeah, Shannon, I saw your head pop up. We need to get a certification out there for the website developers that they understand the rule, and this is a compliant template. That ain't going to happen overnight, but it would be nice. Transaction monitoring. Remember that express informed consent, the only way you have a hope of complying with that is to monitor every single transaction. There's technology that helps, but it's got to be done. And this is one of the cost drivers. And a word about recording. If you have to document oral discussions, and in the F&I box, it's mostly oral. How do you do that? I don't see a way to do it other than recording. Now, people ask me, is recording transactions a good deal or a bad deal? Is it a good idea or a bad idea? And I say yes, because it's both. It's delicate, and it has to be done right. And if you record a transaction improperly, it's better that you didn't. But if you record it properly, I'm glad that you did. What is proper? What is improper? Thing number one, when you record a transaction, you are creating a record that needs to be protected under the terms of the Safeguards Rule. If I hack into a dealership database and I get a deal jacket, I get your identity and I can do some damage. But if I get your voice and image, I can do a deep fake of you and extort your mother. It's got to be protected. So, first thing is, I don't object to recording. I object to dealers recording and doing all that in-house and storing it in-house. That terrifies me. Second thing about recording, why are you doing it? You're doing it because you want to be able to prove what happened if, God forbid, you ever get sued or if there's a consumer complaint. Here's the problem. What if you're doing bad things and you are recording those bad things and you are keeping them, you are maintaining admissible evidence of felonies? I kind of don't like when that happens. So again, this is delicate. What I would suggest is, yes, there is a window where it is very valuable to have those recordings. Generally, 30, 60, 90 days. I don't go much out past 90 days. And then I would like them to be uniformly deleted. Opinions vary on this, but it has to be uniform, because if you never delete anything and then you get sued and then you delete, that's called destruction of evidence, and that's its own little felony problem. So have a uniform policy for retention. And here's the really important part. I don't want to see this happening in the dealership. I want to see this done by a professional company that has bulletproof safeguards in place off-site. This is a liability I don't want inside the four corners of the dealership. So, hat tip to Ron Rehard. Yes, you do a lot of this. And I'm not saying you have to use Ron, but go ahead. But there are other companies who do it. Use those companies. That's what they do, and they do it well. There is a reason we don't make our own light bulbs. You want an expert to do that. Have an expert do your recordings and maintain those recordings off-site in the cloud version of Fort Knox. If you can do all that, I'm all for recording. But if you would be perfect, review the darn things. Review those recordings. That's what they're for, so you can continuously get better. The problem with that is if it's an hour transaction, it takes an hour to review. There are technologies out there that implement AI to do that monitoring for you and to highlight the point in the tape or the point in the transcript where the bad act happened. That's how you do it. I will move on because I've only got like another 3 hours. Paperwork reviews, yes. This has just gone from playing with an M80 to defusing a nuclear bomb. I'm really concerned about what the deal jackets are going to look like. And they're going to have to get better. And you're going to need to do paperwork reviews. That means you're going to have people on staff or vendors who can pull random jackets and make sure you're doing things right. Because $51,744 per violation, think of every darn transaction, every deal jacket as a potential violation. If you do it wrong once, you're going to do it wrong a lot. How you do anything is how you do everything. If you cut corners, it's going to be throughout your entire store. Review the paperwork. Annual audit, independent third-party audit. Got to have it. Can agents audit deal jackets? Yes, you can, and yes, you should. It's important, but it is insufficient. It's inadmissible in evidence because you have an interest in the economic outcome of the transaction you are reviewing. So you have to have an independent third party do an annual audit, and yes, those cost money. All of your F&I product forms are illegal. Every stinking one of them will be illegal the day this rule, if it goes through in its current form. When it becomes enforceable, every F&I contract you've got right now is illegal and cannot be funded by a bank. Same with the DMS. We work with one of the DMSs. We work in their forms department. We make sure their forms are squeaky clean and legal. We draft new ones for them. They don't even do the calculations for what the CARS rule requires be disclosed. So not only do new forms have to be created to run through your DMS, the DMSs have to do the coding to do the calculations, map the form, verify those calculations, populate the form. They want to beta test this, you think? I'm told this is a 1-year effort for every product provider in this room to redo every single one of your contracts, get them approved by all of the states, and get them blessed by all of the banks. How long is that going to take, Tim? Forever? Yeah, in a day. It can't. So what we anticipate is when the litigation shakes out, it's going to say something like, yes, this much of the CARS rule or all of the CARS rule is going to be in effect in 30 days, 60 days, maybe 90 days. It's going to take a year of frantic effort to be able to comply with the rule. And this may be what the FTC is all about. Because if they don't extend that enforcement date, it will simply be illegal and impossible to sell anything but the car itself. Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? So, let's find a runway and set this thing down. What can agents do about all this? Well, you need to be the hero, and that's what we want to help you be. By virtue of the fact that you are in this room this morning, you have self-selected as being the best agents in the country. You know, this was the extra day to Agent Summit. A lot of people went home last night, but you're still here. And why do people come to Agent Summit at all? It's to find out what's new, what's important, and how can I better serve my dealer clients. That's why you're here this morning. I like to believe it wasn't just for the free breakfast. So, what are you learning today? You don't have to be taking copious notes. We're going to record this. We're recording it right now. And we're going to run it through post-production, splice in all the PowerPoint slides, and we will send you all a link to this presentation. You right now know more about the CARS rule than any dealer. And you can send that link to your dealers so that they know we've got you covered. Right now, if dealers are asking you, what do we do about the CARS rule? You can say, we know what might be necessary, but until the litigation is over, we don't know. We're just guessing. But you're going to have a CARS rule response. These bullets look very similar to 2 slides ago. You're going to have a policy template. You're going to have training, document retention, ad reviews, website reviews, AI-enabled transaction monitoring. I recommend it highly. Monthly paperwork reviews, annual audit, and Mr. Dealer, we're going to make this available when it is necessary. We're monitoring the situation. We've got you covered. We've got your back. Does my company do all of this? Of course it does. Does Comply Auto? I'm sure they do. Does KPA? Yes, we have competitors. I don't care who you use. How can you tell when a lawyer is lying? His lips move. No, of course I care. But the more important thing is this, that you find a vendor. No dealer is going to be able to do this organically. Find a vendor, talk to several, find what works, but we're out here. We're out here, and we will be ready. Whether or not the DMS and the product companies can be ready, I don't know. Depends on how much runway we get. But you right now know what's going to be necessary, you know where to find it, and that's why you come to Agent Summit. All right. I left 8 minutes for questions. I was aiming at 5. I didn't talk enough. Wow. I can talk about my grandchildren. Are there any questions? We left time, so yes, sir, in the front.
Two questions. I think you mentioned earlier the time frame you were guessing it was going to take to get some kind of resolve. Based on the scope of what we're looking, how you describe it today, is it within a year realistic? And number two.
Let's do them one at a time, because I'll forget number one when you get to number. Yeah, I'm getting old here. Number one, is it realistic to get all of this resolved in a year? I'm going to take that 2 ways. One is the litigation. The way it goes is this. We filed our amicus brief 3 weeks ago. There's briefs, then there are counter briefs. Court gets all the briefing once the briefing phase is concluded, and then they will do 2 things in the Fifth Circuit. The first is they will define the panel. Who are the 3 judges who are going to hear the case? And then they will say, when are we going to hear oral argument? That can be 90 days out, it could be 120 days out, or they could try to expedite it and say it'll be in 30 days. We have no idea, but it's going to be in a window like that. Then we're all going to go out to Texas. I do not have the right to participate in the oral argument, but I hope to be there eating popcorn, because this is what law geeks do. This is like the Super Bowl. And oral argument's going to happen. Gavel goes down. We will take it under advisement. At that point, the Fifth Circuit could say we want post-argument briefs, but they don't have to. If they do, it's going to extend things another 90 days. If they don't, you're going to get a decision in 90 to 100 days, typically. That puts us all the way into at least the first quarter of 2025. I'm not concerned so much with how long it's going to take to get a legal resolution. I'm really concerned with the effective date after that. And if it's 90 or 120 days, we're screwed unless the CARS rule is trimmed to now the FTC can assess fines. We're good. We're good. Second question.
What is the manufacturer's position?
What is the manufacturer's position? Since I am not an OEM, I cannot say. I am not aware that any of the OEMs filed an amicus brief in support of their dealer base. Maybe they did, but if they have, I hadn't heard it. So I can't answer that question. Anyone else? Yes, Mark.
Yeah, Jim, thanks. So with all the push for digital retailing, before the customer visits the actual dealership, is the dealership also responsible for the presentation?
Oh, yes. So the question is, with digital retailing, before a customer ever gets to the showroom, is the dealer responsible for everything that happens online? And the answer is, oh, yeah, absolutely. And this gets tricky because one of the elements of the rule that is just nonsensical is if a customer makes an inquiry about a specific vehicle, the first thing you have to say is its offered price, its offering price. So if a customer says, does that Ford F-150 come in blue? The salesperson has to say, it's $73,428.97. Yeah, but does it come in blue? That sounds like an exaggeration. It's not. And how do you offer? You're required to disclose every price in its agreed upon retail price and its total cost, including financing over a period of years. How do you do that online before you know what APR the customer is going to qualify for? This is bad news. Yes, sir.
Would this rule also apply and subject VSC providers and administrators to fines?
That is a good question. I would say at least indirectly, yes, because their paperwork has to be able to accommodate the disclosures that we've talked about. And if it does not, and a dealer in good faith uses those documents, I think the dealer would have at least a negligence claim for indemnification against the product provider. Yeah, so there is a cost of compliance for the providers, for the dealers, and ultimately for the consumers, because who ultimately pays for this? I did my math. I'm looking at over $1 billion a year. We've got 70, 80,000 car dealers in the United States, including indies. This is a $1 billion problem that customers are going to pay. There's no question about that. Yes, sir.
I sat through a similar seminar that you gave in September of 22 regarding the FTC safeguards. What's the likelihood, whether it gets trimmed with this CARS or not, whether it gets trimmed, whether it stays intact, that we get a compliance extension date? Like FTC safeguards just continue to push by months and months. Will that happen with this, do you think?
The question is, will the enforcement date be extended? And the answer is it has been because of the litigation. So we don't know how long it's going to be extended, but it's certainly extended for the duration of the Fifth Circuit appeal, plus however much time the Fifth Circuit gives us. And if the Fifth Circuit says enforcement date is 180 days out, 180 days or fewer, you probably will see immediate follow-on litigation simply to stay that enforcement date, because it's impossible. It's just impossible. Be reasonable, will you? And by the time this all comes home to roost, we may very well have a new administration. But that's not a guarantee. I mean, this may not be the hill. Let's say Trump gets elected. This may not be a political hill he wants to expend capital on. I don't know. I mean, I'm not on his Christmas card list, so we will see. Time for one more. Going, yes?
Back to the addendum conversation, the dealer addendum.
Yep.
If that's removed, but there are preloaded or front-loaded products, I'm assuming this would then be sold in F&I if a front-loaded product is not wanted, and then disable or remove that at time of sale.
The rule is not that specific. What it is specific about, I'm sorry, the question being, can you still front-load products and then remove them in the F&I box if the customer doesn't want them? The rule doesn't get to that level of detail, but we do know that it has the cost of those preloaded products has to be in the offered price. And then you're getting down to, does the customer have the ability to negotiate price and benefits? I can't see that going away. Could I see the Federal Trade Commission finding a way to make it illegal? Yes, but we're not there yet. Let's see what this law actually looks like when it lands. And that's probably going to be 9 to 12 months before we know. But I would be I'd be getting dealers ready. And I would be making sure our dealers are taking a real hard look in the mirror. Are we doing everything right now, today? Is there anything we could be sued for? Is anything that's in this rule something that we're currently doing? Are we overcharging for nitrofill? Are we selling gap on cash deals? Unlikely. Are we bullying people? Unlikely. But look at it and ask yourself, are we going to be at risk for any of these things? Tighten up your advertising processes. Do audits. Train your people. Have written policies. There's a lot you can do to get ready that's going to be to the dealer's benefit, even if the rule goes away completely. I think we're out of time. So, Jeff, I will hand the microphone back to you. And I thank you very much for your attention. Thanks for being here.